everybody to this um, training on observation methodology in aeromagnetic data interpretation. This is one of its kind. We want to actually start by giving people some information on how this method can actually be utilized by most of our geoscientists, some of our mining engineers, and some people that actually find themselves in the field of geosciences and also in exploration activities. My name is N.C. Gideon. N.C. Gideon is a geologist, I'm a geophysicist, and also a trained mine planner. So I think this method is a method that I think that is very, very important that everybody needs to understand. The simplest way to recognize some anomalies, interpret some expressions from magnetic rock units. Actually, we ask ourselves, what do we measure? As a matter of introduction to this, I believe that, at least for you to understand this, we are not trying to go into processing right now, but we will try to, as much as possible, explain what we want to view as regards to this method. Now, in terms of processing, we assume that at least at this stage we want to simplify it in as much as possible so that when one is viewing, because at every point in time in your field of study or in reporting and also interpretation of some aeromagnetic data, you will come across some data which you are not the one that processed it, but it is very important that you see this data and make some inferences, a quick one. What are we actually measuring when it comes to aeromagnetic surveys? Aeromagnetic survey is a scalar strength of the local earth field. If you've used some of the work done by Reeves 2005, you'll understand what I mean. This measurement is just simply a combination of earth core field, as also documented in IGRF, which is International Geomagnetic Reference Field, and the field induced in crustal rocks. So we'll call this measured data, or this measurement, the total magnetic intensity, which is actually referred to as TMI. But most of the readers should be aware that the TMI images that are basic product of aeromagnetic data or aeromagnetic survey are usually the difference between the measured field and the IGRF. So this residual field is often referred to as IGRF. So the IGRF residual, in some cases, is particularly crustal scale images. So the magnetic anomalies should be noted. So that is just it. So the vector component of the field are often measured on the board, the aircraft, but are really used as survey products. The most of our units is the nanotesla unit, as actually used in the field of strength of magnetic intensities. So in this, we are trying to show a very quick way you can actually look at magnetic data, make some inferences before you go into the actual interpretation. So this is like a prerequisite that is required for that. In this, we will look at about 10 things we are trying to bring out from this. First one will be, we'll look at the application of aeromagnetic data. We'll look at some of the objectives, summary of the objectives we've developed into this study, and again, the methodology, the observation styles. Then we'll look at the white paper tests or the screen tests. Then we'll look at the issues affecting the integrity of the observation layer. Then we'll look at the magnetic anomalies. We'll look at the scale of observations. What scale are we observing the data? We look at where one should start from while observing magnetic data. Also, some of the issues that are affecting the integrity of our interpretation or observations will be looked into. Then finally, we need to summarize some of the key points that are required in observation methodology. Okay, before we go into this, we want to understand some major applications of this. One is in oil discovery. Most of the major mines, like the Carrington mines, the Olympic dams in Australia, actually is a major product of aeromagnetic data interpretations. So also, why do we use this is because of its extensive nature of coverage. It's not something you apply in places that are of a very small area. Aeromagnetic data survey is very, very useful when it comes to areas of, talk about state, a nation, a country, a community, and all that. So within a very short period of time, you can cover a lot of long range of kilometers in 10 kilometers by 10, 20 by 20, 50 by 50. So it is very, very important and useful in extensive coverage. Again, it goes beyond a superficial interpretation to what we can say, go into interpretation of 2D or 3D. So this is just more than superficial geological mapping at the surface. This can go very deep beyond the Earth's surface down, to the crux and the middle mantle. That when this gets to, it becomes, when we get to the Courier point, it becomes, some of the rocks we are actually looking at becomes very, very demagnetized, or they lose their magnetic property because of the properties they've actually acquired due to temperature and pressure. Also, we need to understand that this has been an old method normally used in oil and gas for basin analysis, but these days it has made a comeback in the mineral industry. So most of the structural analysis that we do these days, we make use of aeromagnetic data. First of all, before you go into any form of reconnaissance kind of work, especially when it comes to rocks, especially when it comes to minerals that are actually found in veins, minerals that are not actually stratified. So this is actually what we use for interpretation. So let's look at our overall objectives. One, will make sure that will enhance your observation capability at the end of this. Secondly, we want to ensure that you understand what it takes to integrate geological data, the importance of this. Then thirdly, we will understand the versatility of magnetic method. And finally, we'll have to understand the potentials of using aeromagnetic data. So these are the 4-point objectives of this course. Okay, we look at the methods that are actually involved when we're talking about observation methodology. What do we actually mean? So, observation methodology actually involves two separate classes of features, that are observable from an aeromagnetic image. The first of this image is the magnetic rock units, and the second is the pattern trends and discontinuities. Magnetic rock units will become the basic building here, the basic building blocks of our interpretation, while the pattern trends will guide our thinking on how these building blocks are linked. So during this observation stage, it is advisable initially to focus on the magnetic rock unit before drawing too many kinds of breaks and discontinuities. So when we are talking about magnetic rock units, magnetic rock units they are mappable units. These are the units that we first of all need to understand before going into drawing patterns and all that. Now I will show you one example here. Okay, if we look at this, we can see this is a live project going on. Let's look at this. when we're talking about mappable rock units or magnetic rock units, let's use this, mainly looking at this region. You can see there are clear expressions which have actually been identified here. There's a magnetic rock unit identified along this region, and also there's a magnetic rock unit identified at this region. So if you look at it, there's a very clear demarcations at the contact zones actually marked at the structures and all that. So what did we do here? We are able to identify these rock units and their contact zones. Now we tried to verify these rock units in the field and see if actually this exists. So if you look at these points, this is where some of the data were actually collected in the field. This is the track road. You can see this also. So when looking at this, you'll be able to say there is a rock unit running in this direction. There is a rock unit here. There is observable rock units along this zone, which was actually identified in the field and picked. Most of the contact zones were actually picked, and some mineralization were actually found within the contact zones. So when we are talking about observation, it is very clearly something you can see from the aeromagnetic data expressions and note them clearly with different lines. If you look at what we observe here and what actually observed here, there's a different line here and there's another different line here. If I try to bring in other kind of work that actually been done here, you will see that these are actually recorded based on different lines. So this is an inverse first vertical derivatives of this shades. If you look at here, let's bring in the gray color. The gray color actually also have some distinct expression which matches the initial interpretation. So you can see here the lines are very clear here, the observations are very clear here, there's another observations that are very clear here, and also look at this, the observations are very clear. And one thing is very critical, you can look at the directions of observations. You can see that most of the directions are northeast. The few are going in different directions, which was actually identified using other layers. So it is very, very important that when you are marking your observations, make sure that you mark them in different layers. Okay, let's see this. This is another observations. You can see this is inverse of 1xt. So this is in x direction. You can see that this is a bit clearer in this. Then let's look at another one here. This is the color of this is that of 1xt also, but the colored. Then let's look at one. You can see this is in y direction. So all the features and the structures that are running in or northeast clearly defined, more clearly defined, and also align with some of the interpretations actually done here. So what are we trying to say here? There are three major rock units that are very broad that we actually found within this region, and based on the field work, this actually was proved to be correct. You can see the ground truthing of this. So some of the work that was actually done here, we actually identify some of these contacts here to be mineralized. Thank you for actually listening. Ensure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel for future notifications so that from time to time you will get some of our free videos, and there are some of our trainings that will give based on registration, and some will actually give based on request, and all that. You can also have access to that.